10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. Liftoff.
Hello Luna Classic community, we wanted to bring you this AMA that took place between Classy Crypto and Zaradar regarding Terra Luna Classic. We wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to watch this and know what is going on. Thanks to Classy Crypto for being such an advocate for the Terra Luna Classic community, and thank you to Zaradar for getting this information out to our community and beyond.
To put it bluntly, Terra Luna Classic as of late has been going in quite the trajectory. In fact, so far, we've been getting a lot of developers kind of coming back into the ecosystem. And one of the big ones that came from the Luna crash is named Zaradar. He's actually working alongside Terrebels in bringing up one of the most popular USDC repack proposals. So, Zaradar, you can go ahead and introduce yourself. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of questions. A lot of people are excited about the future of Terra Luna Classic. So, how you doing?
Hey, buddy. Thank you for having me on the show, first of all. I'm doing great. It's finally weekend. Now I get to relax and fold my laundry and clean my dishes and
yell about Lunk, right?
And have fun with Lunk and be a lunatic and write some code, right? So it's always great when it's weekend. But yeah, I'm doing good, and I must admit I'm a bit stoked about the sort of, traction the proposal got in public. It's been something that I've actually been sort of trying to explain to people almost since day one, that the only path to recovery was, creating actual value. I saw the fact that the SECs decided to keep us listed, especially Binance, as, a very rare lifeline that's not always extended in situations like that. And I think, as a community, we have to grab on to that with both hands and prove to the world that we can create, a functioning, decentralized blockchain ecosystem where actual business value flows through it and where people work together to make the network bigger rather than fight over whatever random stuff.
I always say we got a lifeline from Binance and a lot of these larger centralized exchanges. So to go out there and kind of go against them, to me, would just be shooting ourselves in the foot, right? We got that opportunity. Let's go ahead and leverage it and build something great off of it, right?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So Zaradar, before we get into your proposal, I think getting some background on your prior experience in not only crypto, but just Luna Classic in general, what you've contributed, would be great to give some context on how you've helped so far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my background is fairly vast, right? I started writing software back in 1998, so that's almost an age ago. Probably.
How old are you?
Even born. I'm 43.
Wow, okay.
And then I quickly found out that the path to, a bigger paycheck was more knowledge. And I just started studying and becoming better and better and just owning my skills, so to speak. And then somewhere around, I think it was 2015, my dad, of all people, who's like the least technical person on the planet, told me about this thing called Bitcoin. And I was like, what the fuck do you know about Bitcoin? I mean, I had read about it a few years prior. I was like, okay, somebody's making internet money. But he gave me this really, big news article from a very, acknowledged, I guess you could call it, newspaper in Denmark. And I read, I was like, okay, there's some guys building this Bitcoin transaction business. And at that point in time, I was working for a real bank, right? So I was like on the inside of the banking system. So I understood inherently how that worked, and I understood how the products were being designed and how they might not always take as much risk as they wanted people to think while, making a lot of money. And I inherently thought that, crypto was clearly a better path. So I quit my job back in the end of 2015, bought around 2,000 Ethereum at around $1 or something like that. And then I started a blockchain consultancy firm, basically, where I focused primarily on Ethereum and IOTA because they represented two different blockchain designs, one being a proof of work, blockchain with a virtual machine, which was the new invention compared to Bitcoin. And then IOTA being basically a feeless distributed acyclical graph, which they then later with the Chrysalis upgrade changed back to Ethereum design and more like a real blockchain kind of setup, but still with the same features and so on. So that was my sort of original move into crypto. And then I simply just spent a lot of time following along on the sidelines, studying the technology while taking care of my day job. And I then pivoted into playing around with EOS for a bit. And then I started playing around with XRP. And then I kind of stuck with XRP up until around the Terra crash, where I then flipped whatever, assets I owned, or what I had left from playing my crypto game, which was not insignificant, into to Luna. And that was obviously the worst trading decision of my 8 years, experience into trading crypto as well. And then we hit the bottom, and I was like, well, the age-old saying of investment is that you should never buy anything that you're not willing to own forever. And at this point, I was quite clearly in a position where I was going to own my, what was now long tokens forever. So I decided that maybe it was about time for me to apply the skills I had to sort of fix the problem that nobody wanted to fix. And I was at that point in May, I was actually in Spain talking on something called KubeCon, which is like the biggest Kubernetes IT conference in the world. And I was out, having drinks with people like, IT people from JP Morgan and some of my colleagues and people from German bank companies and so on. And I got a bit too bold and a bit too drunk. I was like, I'm going to fucking fix this mess. So I forked a lot of code, and then I hooked up with Ed and Radar when I came home. And then it sort of all kind of took off from there when we joined the Discord, and we found a path to sort of re-enabling staking and basically bringing the community back together. And from there on out, I basically started looking at, how can we bring this back to a viable point where I can then start applying some of the research I did back in 16, 17, and 18 around how you can build basically what amounts to decentralized cloud computing on POS systems akin to what you get from Cosmos.
So the entire time it was just staking. I played around with yields. I went into Luna. It didn't work out for me. I saw that there was a resemblance of community, saw some of my connections there, and boom. You're here today with Terra Rebels and all this greatness.
Yeah.
That's such a come-up story, right? That's incredible. And, let's go ahead, put this one out of the park because people are asking a lot. Is this proposal going to have anything to do with minting Luna Classic?
So I think, first of all, people have to understand that minting in itself is an essential component of our blockchain, right? The whole validator, delegator model couldn't work without minting, because the way that it works is that whenever you and we do transactions on the network, these fees are collected and then they are stored as a number on chain, and then they're burned, right?
Correct.
And then they don't get minted back into existence until 6.6 days later when the epoch ends, or if, that's basically how it works at the base level. And that means that if there were no minting, there would be no validator rewards. If there were no validator rewards, there would be no blockchain, right? So that's the first thing to make very clear. I think what's more at the point here is, do we do any artificial minting, or do we do too much minting, right? We're still in the process of experimenting with our capital controls. And I think that's something that we will have to figure out as we go along. But one thing that I don't want is for us to, artificially spawn another 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 or even 100 billion worth of long tokens, because that would really just collapse the entire effort that everybody has been working so tirelessly towards. And I don't really think the value we have is the value of the token itself. It's the value of all of these people working together to build a decentralized collective This is what Binance is banking on. This is what the world is working towards with blockchains. And I think we have a real shot at doing that because unlike any other blockchain, we got bankrupt to the point where, all the smart money left. And now you have all the scavengers coming in, trying to, look at the rubble and see how they can construct new great things. And out of that, we could create something that's even more beautiful than what was there before, while also being a lot more decentralized. And that, I think, would be proof that the technology is not only about Ponzi schemes. And I think in generally, it's about time that we as a blockchain community and the entire ecosystem start proving to the world that the blockchain is more than just about the price going up 1,000% and then dropping 90%.
You're so right about that. As a creator, inevitably you have to talk about price action because that's what people are interested in. But at the end of the day, talking about decentralized finance and having a world where there may be a possibility that cryptocurrency isn't seen as a Ponzi scheme, for me, that's a bet I'm willing to take. And for the most part, that's why we're making validators. That's probably why you're working your tail off to make these things happen. And so let's go ahead and pivot over here into your USDC repack proposal. Go over this, go really in depth, make sure people understand what's going on. Let's start from the start, and you can go ahead.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Of course.
So basically, I just need to get it up on screen so I can walk through it again.
Yep.
But basically, the idea with the repack proposal is saying, how do we get ourselves out of the current situation without necessarily having to print more money? And the way that I structured the proposal was that I know a lot of people, they, have the whole TLDR thing. So I tried to basically first summarize it in somewhat of an executive summary, because then at least I could, give a high-level abstract view on the solution for the people who don't read more than maybe a few pages, right? And then I tried to add in some more detail about the different components just to basically make it for the people who got to the end so they could explore a bit more in depth what things are about. But in general, the whole idea is about saying, how do we get out of Goblin Town, right? We're basically stuck with a mountain of debt, and moving a mountain isn't easy. We could blow it up if we had enough dynamite. In this would be the equivalent to liquidity or capital, but we don't really have that. And it's going to be a trick to incentivize new investors to come in until we provide a certain amount of stability guarantees, I guess you could say, because otherwise they would just fear getting rug pulled, because that seems to be the standard in crypto. So basically what I tried to do was to summarize two parts. One where we did, quantitative easing. We printed more whatever kind of LOC or USDC or whatever we needed. And then we tried to find people to buy that so we could then dilute the debt and basically recapitalize the system to the point where we repack USDC to something. The problem with this is, like I said before, we got a lifeline. We have to prove that we can build a functioning ecosystem. I don't think we're going to have a lot of investors in that model. I think rather we will probably lose a lot of hodlers in that model because people will feel that their current investments are just being diluted further, and that will again undermine people's efforts. And this is why I just came to the conclusion that maybe it's just time to, suck the bullet and basically say, okay, we need to do this via sweat equity, and we need to build, and we need to create a mechanical solution that will allow builders to come in and generate what is inherently the equivalent to a lot of small liquidity flows that are isolated from our inherent volatility due to the amount of tokens and lack of liquidity in the network at the time, to the point where they can all sort of grow naturally based on their ability to either survive or perish as a startup. But if enough of these startups, they grow, then as small streams of water, they will slowly start to erode the debt mountain once they become big enough to start, trading out of their individual partition pools and into other pools. And there will be this thing that I call the threshold that sort of governs this, which is really a two-component thing. There's like a hard threshold where there's like in the code we'll set a fixed value. In the proposal for it, we'll probably say we propose impose a hard threshold of 5 million or whatever. And then there will be a governance, you could call it the soft cap parameter, where people can then tweak that, because then we have like a security backstop. So if somebody corrupts the consensus layer, they can't just drop the threshold to 0 and flood all of the commodity pools into the USDC market, while we still allow the spillage, as I call it, or the excess value or liquidity in the partition pools to then start trading through the mountain, so to speak, in a way that will slowly erode it and wear it down. And this might take a long time, depending on how many successful businesses we bring on. But at least these businesses will be generating real value and not just, printing more monopoly money to try to defend monopoly money.
Yeah, something for me about Terra Luna Classic, and I think a good point that you made was the inherent volatility in our asset. Most businesses don't want to stomach Terra Luna Classic moving up 300% or going down 50% the other day. I mean, inherently, we're an asset that's moving a lot. Real value hasn't been found yet. And while it may be very bullish for us and it may be great for businesses, they don't want to take the risk. So do you find any difficulty finding people to get into our blockchain as somebody in Terra Rebels because of the volatility that we have right now? Is that why you proposed partition pools?
Yeah, I mean, I've been, as part of my last job before I swapped to my current employer, I was actually working with advising them on their blockchain strategies as well. And one of the things that we discussed internally was the whole idea of setting up our own value chain or blockchain or whatever we wanted to call it to sort of secure our liquidity as a company, because just piling into Bitcoin, I mean, you can see what the trouble MicroStrategy is in at the moment. They might survive it, they might not, it doesn't really matter, but it's a big risk to take for a company, right? And that's why I think inherently what will happen is that people will want to try to protect their initial liquidity, and then once they grow strong enough, they will start trading through other sort of reserve currencies. And this is where the whole Bitcoin standard narrative fits in, because then Bitcoin becomes the reserve currency of everything. And then the owners of Bitcoin, they basically, gain the capability to rent seek this volume, which is basically what you do when you offer an economic network to people to transact through. And in the same way, with these partition pools, we would be able to grow into a point where USDC would act as this reserve currency for the commodity pools, and thus allowing us to regain some of the investment that we put into allowing the startups to build at the protocol layer, which also eliminates a lot of complexity for them, right? They don't have to set up a smart contract. They don't have to do all sorts of things that inherently might be complex. They just have to pay a fee through the CLI, and that will give them a partition pool that's empty, and then they go buy some LONC and swap it into that. And then they can airdrop it to their users and get their business running.
And is that just like a flat Terra Luna Classic fee when they start up, and then they don't have to do that anymore? It's just USDC after that?
No, the way that I looked at this was that the initial fee is flat because it's simply just spam protection, right? But then afterwards, there's the whole, if these partition pools are meant to become the economic engines of our primary money supply, or USDC and LONC, then we need to somehow split the baby so that all camps benefit from this, right? Because if we made a model where commodity pool or partition pools would work exclusively with one or the other, then one of these sides would feel left out, right? And we have currently a situation where we have a huge oversupply of LONC based on the USDC DPEG, basically. And I don't inherently think it's anybody's fault. I just think that we need to deal with that oversupply as a community. And for me, the best way to do that was to say, okay, you can create your pool with an initial fee, that's your spam protection. Then you can capitalize the pool using LONC. Once you cross the threshold, which we spoke about just before, you can then start swapping in and out of that pool with USDC using a remittance corridor, right? Yeah. So there's no doubt that initially when we're in the startup foundational phase, the government doing the debt to equity swap with the startups vis-a-vis long will, initially earn the brunt of it, and that will lead to, long tokens being burned to set up these tokens. But then once these token or these commodity tokens and their pools, they become, or the ones that do become successful businesses, they start trading exclusively through USDC, because nobody can trade into long until there's less than 10 billion long left, which means that will take quite some time, right? And thus, this is the split the baby part. So the long, pool gets to fill up the business partitions, and if they become successful businesses, then the USDC pool, so to speak, gets to become the reserve currency, and thus gain the ability to earn some fees and some taxes and so on.
Yeah, that just clicked in my head. So essentially, they go ahead, get onto our place. Let's say we're a launch pad. They want to onboard to the 5 million wallets that we have. They pay that small lunk fee, but because we don't want to mint more lunk, it can't go the other way. So it's just a one-time fee. They go on there, and USDC, as you build that reserve with swaps, it should hopefully one day become that reserve currency. And that's an interesting topic because, a majority of lunk holders at this point, you'd presume are holders that are new, right? They all left pretty much for the most part to Luna 2.0. Yeah. So, there was another proposal that came out, and it was USTN. They were something about, 150 billion Terra Luna Classic was minted, but that they were going to burn a bunch of extra. Why are you so, insistent on repegging USTC rather than another stable coin?
I'm not necessarily insistent on one or the other in that sense. What I'm insistent on is creating a mechanical system that can work with what I call the tokenomics of Terra, because we have many different coins and many different good ideas that people want to do. And that's what I want to do. And by fixing the base layer, there could be a world where USTN and USDC could coexist, right? For me, it's just a matter of which one becomes the reserve currency. And then I think inherently having USDC and USTN coexist might create some consumer confusion. So if USTN is basically some sort of debt, IOU, because we burned 150 billion long from the Oracle, then why not just call it something else? That will make much better, usability anyways for the end user, because they're going to be like, am I going to buy USDC or USTN?
You're right, yeah.
But if one is just called Treasury Debt Token and the other one is called, USDC, then it still amounts to the same thing from a technical perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Why call USTN if they're going to both coexist? Yeah, that was interesting. I saw Edward Kim talking about that. You two, you talk very frequently. You're both very open to both proposals, right?
Yeah, Ed and I, we talk together almost every day. We've been working together on this from the beginning, and we are basically the two core developers on the layer one, and then we have Max and trying to catch up, doing great strides at that. So hopefully we will be 4 developers on the layer one, distributed across different time zones as well, which is great. But yeah, Ed and I, we talk a lot, and we have the same goals at the end of the day, because we kind of started this journey together. What happens often is just that we have a lot of different, responsibilities in our lives. So Ed and me sort of working together in public is not seen as much, right? We do like late night Discord sessions, just one-on-one, and sit around and talk about our different challenges, like for instance, dealing with the security upgrade of the network that we had to do over the last 5 days without anybody finding out, right? That's a good example of how Ed and I, we communicate. So yeah, we talk every day.
Yeah, it was that whole Cosmos vulnerability, right? That you had to go through on October 10th.
The ICS 23 thing.
Do we have to be worried of any other exploits happening with Lunk?
That's to be decided. It's still experimental software. I've gone through most of the software when I forked the code, and I actually published a post-mortem document outlining our security vulnerabilities, and then I fixed what I saw to be the primary vulnerability, which was the encryption of the mnemonic in the Oracle price feeder, because TFL had been using SHA-1 encryption, which hasn't been used since 2014 because it got cracked back in 2013, which meant that I, as a Terra D developer, could have released a version of the blockchain that could actually have decrypted all the mnemonics for all the validators and then DNS exfiltrated them to my server, and then I could have just taken over the entire network. So the point is that I mean, there are flaws like this when people build software. The problem of what we're doing is that it's so complex that, you know, the reason why it's hard to find a lot of blockchain developers is that there's like a literal vertical knowledge mountain from regular distributed systems development to building, you know, replicated state machines vis-a-vis blockchains, because it's some odd mixture between, you know, distributed systems and encryption and peer-to-peer, and then there's some gRCP on top of that and event-driven systems and so on. So it's just fucking difficult to reason about, and this is why sometimes you get these things that you call emergent behavior, characteristics of the software system that you didn't know existed until the code started running, right? So you've seen the Terminator, right?
Yeah, I have.
Good. So Skynet is emergent behavior. Skynet was not built to be evil. Skynet was built to protect the US. But then Skynet figured out after it went live that it was a lot better to just kill off all the people, because then they wouldn't make any more problems, right? So that is an example of emergent behavior. In the same way, the DPEG with the USDC thing, all the people who looked at the algo, all of the people who read the white papers and invested money into it, they weren't stupid people. They just couldn't see this flaw because of the complexity and the fact that it was kind of like emergent behavior, right? It happened when the system was in a given state paired with the market being in a given state and so on.
Wow. Yeah, I think you just blew everybody's mind when you said that. You essentially just saved Terra Luna Classic then with that update, right?
Yeah, I mean, we did, and there's a lot of people who worked on this, and then, I mean, the real credit goes out to the Cosmos and the Osmosis crews who's been working on the core update, because this is something that affects all of the Cosmos chains. So they have been basically reaching out to all of the chains, giving them the patch, you know, helping us reason about it and stuff like that. So the real credit goes to them. We were just, you know, I got a message from one of our validator friends. Then I got a hold of Vegas. Yeah. Vegas got a hold of TFL, you know, talked with Ed. They gave him the code. He merged that into the branch. We then talked with the validators. It then got deployed, and all of this had to happen without anybody knowing, right? So
of course.
That I think was really the impressive part of it, with what Cosmos managed to do. And what is also, I guess, one of the strengths of decentralized networks, because we all know that keeping a secret becomes increasingly harder when more people know about the secret, right? But we still manage to patch all of these networks past the 2/3 consensus level without anybody knowing. And that, I think, is, you know, from a technical perspective, you know, not easy and actually very well executed.
Yeah, don't forget, guys, network upgrades need to be passed by validators. So he had to contact validators that contacted him to make sure that they got the 2/3 vote passed in time for nobody to notice. And a bunch of people were working together. That is such a crazy story. Mike, and nobody knew about that. That is, you guys did it, man. Wow, that's incredible. I think
that this whole Lunatics Terra Classic adventure is such a great, crazy story that if
you guys get me more
makes a movie about this, then I'm
there needs to be a movie, yeah. Yeah, you need to star in that.
Do that at some point, yeah.
For sure. You know, and the crazy part is that you guys aren't going through conventional methods. I mean, there was this meme going around with the UST back in the day where people were going about, oh, it's going to hit $2 or $4. And then I saw in your proposal, you talked about sound money, right? So it's not actually pegged to the dollar. It just goes anywhere. It's just low volatility, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could say that one of the inherent problems with fiat is that the government tells you what it's worth, right? The good thing with crypto is that the market decides what it's worth. And this is why I think sound money is some sort of market money that will find, you know, an equilibrium based on the supply and demand. And it might, you know, slide in different directions, but it doesn't do it with a 30 or 40 or 50% hit, right? It might decline 0.5% or a percent or a few percent, over a period of time, but then it might correct the other way and so on. But the level it stays at should always be based on supply and demand, because otherwise it will be pretty hard for it to, really maintain any sort of balance.
Yeah, keep in mind that most of these stable coins, they have like market makers keeping their peg at all times. They have like this huge over collateralization of tokens, and that's not really what like algorithmic tokens do, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, just take the example of Tether. Tether is backed by 4 banks in Taiwan, right? And they've been backed by these banks ever since they launched back in the days. And even in their existence, I have witnessed Tether crash to 79 cents, of which it, bob up and down between $1 and 98 and then $1 and 1. And the point is just that Tether is turning into sound money. They should just call it that rather than stable coins, and they would probably have less problems, because recently they also, they've been selling the commodity backing also, I think, and stuff like that. So they're basically, I think, trying to keep it as some sort of stable coin, but maybe not having it totally static, I guess.
It's interesting, Zaradar, that you say that, because we could be innovators in the space, right? We could be the first to make an algorithmic token and really embrace what cryptocurrency is as a decentralized form of currency that has really come from nothing at this point, I guess you could say. It's pretty incredible to see what we're trying to do in a space where people are still all for centralization. They're all for regulation. All these stablecoins, they want to be stablecoins. They want to work with the government because they want to make money, right? But, we're kind of taking the back foot here and saying, we're going to embrace cryptocurrency. We're going to do what Reddit couldn't do back in the day and just say, we're going to see what the community, what the developers, what these geniuses like Zaradar can do, because, I don't understand half the things you say when it comes to hard development on code. Because, of course, I don't think a lot of people understand it. So, it's always a great thing to have people like you on our side, right? And not in some centralized entity's side, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's about striking a balance. Extremes are no good, right? Too much decentralization is also a problem. So at the end of the day, we need to find this balance. But I think, we need a different system. I think everybody can see that by now.
That's incredible.
And we need to find a way to create self-regulating systems, because otherwise we will just get another type of censorship, which is weak censorship through governments and so on. And I don't think anybody has really found that balance yet. But I think, at least a few networks like our network and some of the other, like Shibuino and so on, they're sort of going through the austerity phase right now to prove to the world that they can become viable networks. For me, DeFi is basically penny stocks, right? So there's like regular stocks in Ethereum, then you have penny stocks for the masses in DeFi, and then you have Bitcoin as gold on top, right? Mm-hmm. And this is like the last phase of the foundational layers of crypto, where all of the chains will start merging together and utilizing each other's computational power and so on to basically make a global network of interconnected chains that will just, substitute the existing networks, so to speak.
Yeah, just a giant blockchain. It's kind of like you were in quant, right?
Sorry?
Did you? Because I know Alex was working with the quant team at some point, and those guys were trying to do like interoperability in blockchains. So you just think one day we're all just working together.
I'm on all the teams more or less, but yeah, I also work with the quant team quite a lot, and I'm basically scaling down my presence now to only focus on the classic core team and the quant team, because the other teams have become somewhat self-sustaining with, the DevOps team, where we have some really cool guys working together. The front-end team is also, Marventus and Yogi and these guys, they're just insane. They just keep on working, every day, all day. So we have a lot of stability happening in these teams, and then we're reorganizing a bit with some people moving into the TCV thing and so on. But overall, I'm fairly confident with the current setup to the point where I can now scale down and just focus on the quant team and the classic core team, because I think one of the essential things that we're missing in the sort of whole discussion about the, algorithm and how to fix the treasury and so on is general consensus, right? We never really succeeded in producing a white paper on a coherent strategy for that. And I think inherently over time, Alex's ideas and Fafi's ideas and my ideas and other people's ideas will have to be, put together and looked at by the team, and then we will have to distill, a coherent strategy from that we can then present for the governance layer to vote on, and then basically enshrine that as the white paper on how to fix our economy. So we can stop all the discussion on how to do it and gain consensus and focus on how to do it, because this is, I think, a missing piece in our community, along with this other constitution component that I like to talk about, that would probably create more sort of shared focus and thus momentum.
It's kind of like infrastructure, right? You got to build up the infrastructure in the economy.
Yeah.
You got to have a plan out there. It's like capitalism, whatever you go ahead and see as the ideology that you favor, to be able to build an economy, right? And the same applies to Terra Luna Classic. You need to have the blueprint there to be able to do this successfully. And I like this pivot here because, there was a proposal that recently came out, and it was 5234 talking about lowering the tax rate to 0.2% and setting aside like 10% of the tax revenue to the actual infrastructure. And to me, that was pretty interesting because, for developers, you guys are all doing volunteer work. You're getting paid nothing to be able to do these things. And something I saw on Happy Caddy's podcast was the fact that you guys are working off like laptops in random places all over the planet. And that's decentralization in a nutshell, right? It would be great for you to get a cut out of this. Do you see this proposal, this parameter change proposal, as something that you'd see as favorable to your proposal, or is it something separate?
I think CSAT said it very well, right? If you lower your taxes, you get more volume. If you get more volume, you burn more things long term. Whether or not it has to be 10% of that goes into fixing the potholes or whatever, I don't know. But I think, I've been very vocal about this ever since the beginning. The burn tax was never about anything other than creating consensus and shared direction and focus. Now that it's here, we were all very clear on the fact that it would cause transactions to fall and volume to go away. But now we have to be very careful that we don't drop it too much too fast, right? Because we're still trying to figure out what is the optimal balance between, enabling organic growth and still being able to collect taxes to fund our sort of core infrastructure. Because in the last few months, we've been spending our energy on building up our intellectual capital in order to service the platform and fixing, all of the really critical stuff. Now we're at a point where we're slowly starting to set up, auxiliary LCD things. People are getting ready to bring their own validators online soon when the staking thing triggers and so on. And that allows us then to focus on the infrastructure point, while I'm getting the architects to work with me on basically teaching Terra Rebels that we are offering what I like to call platform as a product, right? So we're basically focusing on the platform layer. Our job is to make that work for others. And then we are bringing in other teams that are also working with us to build on top of that, right? So all in all, I think that is that's all going in a very positive direction that really gives me faith that we have people who really mean it and not just people sitting around having fun on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly, right? We need to start focusing on actually building things. And I like how you say it shouldn't just be one layer of development. It should be layers on layers on layers of decentralization at some point. And something else I wanted to bring up was, TFL, clearly I'm looking right now at Terra Station. And Terra Station is owned by TFL. I presume, from what I can gather, right, they have the LCD and that runs them like $100,000 a month or some absurdity. So, finding a way, do you think there's going to be a world where these validators have a bunch of different websites where they do governance, or will it always be just one centralized hub for governance?
Well, I mean, I think what a lot of people probably don't know is that many months ago we were about 3 hours from launching our own Terra Station, fully redundant, and then TFL accepted our pull request at the last minute. And that means that we can run the Terra Station ourselves. So I think Terra Station is, here to stay, but it's not necessarily the only wallet or client that will ever get built, right? Anybody can build clients and wallets and so on if they want to. And I don't think, it's not going to be that much work for us to basically take that over from TFL at some point. I just think we're trying to focus on the important things right now, while TFL is, you could say that they're actually helping us by keeping these things running, right? As you said yourself, they're wasting north of $100,000 a month on running this, so it's costing them money out of their pocket. Obviously, they also have, liquidity that should be used for this, but still. But I think, long term, I would encourage us to have many different versions of Terra Station, different applications. And then we will have to probably, set up our own mobile apps and stuff like that, because those things are typically subject to tighter scrutiny, right? So when you launch an app with Google or Apple, then you have to actually get your code reviewed. And if you're running with a, first-time license, they will probably spend more time looking at the code, even though the code is already kind of in the store because another license is running the same code. So that means that we might as well just build new mobile applications that are more efficient than the current ones. And this is again where the beasts in the front-end team are doing some, cool work on looking at what the possibilities are around that.
So it's in the development scheme, but it's not important because, if TFL is going to be getting the bag for spending on the whole LCD thing, why do it now, right?
Well, the LCD thing and the Terra Station thing aren't really intertwined in that way. So the Terra Station is just more about, us having to fork a lot of NPM packages and basically host Terra Station on a web server. Terra Station then uses the LCD to fetch data from the blockchain. But it's more the work of forking all the NPM repos and recreating those. And we did a lot of that work, many, many months ago, and then stopped in the 11th hour. But we still have the capacity to do that. But it's not really my decision or even area of responsibility to determine what happens with that, right? That's more Marventus and his guys, because, like I said, they are, basically it's like when you move into a code repository, it's like moving into a house, right? And then first you figure out where the furniture are and where the bathroom are and the bedroom and the kitchen, and then you start moving things around so you become comfortable. And I don't want to, go into their house and tell them where to put the chair or the sofa. So they're kind of,
they know how to do it,
figuring
right?
that out on their own right now. And like I said, these guys have been working as hard as we have, if not more, actually, because typically, while the blockchain or the layer one takes, a lot of time to, test and design new things for and so on, the amount of coding that we do compared to what the front-end guys do is, there's a pretty significant difference in terms of the amount of code that they have to write to produce the things that we need from them. So in general, these guys, they probably work, harder than we do if we were looking only at the coding. So I really take my hats off from them because, we're very fortunate to have all of those guys.
The knights in the background carrying the team, right? The people unseen are the most important. And it's great, though, because you have the speaking experience as a developer. You never see that nowadays. So it's always a privilege to have that in this space. So let's bring this back because people are getting a little confused now. Do you see any legal problems coming for USDC with the prior UST branding and US regulation cracking down on stablecoins? I'd suspect the regulation part on stablecoins wouldn't apply to us because of the algorithmic part, but go ahead.
Yeah, so this is not really legal advice, right? Because I'm not a lawyer. But inherently, due to the fact that we are inherently scavengers, I don't think historically governments have a good or a big track record of litigating scavengers for trying to build something out of the rubble. That is basically like from an optics perspective, like, pursuing the poor people. And
Yeah.
that rarely ever, favors any government to do that because the poor people are still the people who have to vote them into power. I don't think we're going to have a lot of legal issues with it because we didn't create these coins. We didn't, cause the situation. We didn't trade the LFG reserves to try to defend something and whatever. We're just people trying to rebuild from the ruins of what was formerly known as Terra. And thus, I don't see any legal argument that really has merit other than we want to blame someone and you guys happen to be the ones that are there now.
That's pretty fair. Yeah, that's a pretty good explanation of that. We're scavengers. And I like saying that. We're all lunatics at the end of the day, so I'm always on board for that. So, Anchor Protocol was really big back in the day, the whole lending protocol craze, as well as like Mirror Protocol. Have you spoken to them? Is there a future of Anchor and Mirror Protocol or something similar coming back to Luna Classic? Because a lot of people are, speculating on these smaller tokens such as Anchor and Mirror. So it would be great to have insight on that if you have it.
Well, I think inherently Anchor was one of the things that made me reluctant to initially invest into Terra, actually. But that was mainly because the interest was simply too high, right? There was like a mismatch between, what was it, 18% or something like that.
Yeah.
And what was, again, this was a good example of basically creating monopoly money with any real world backing, right? And as long as people kept investing into Anchor and locking up more supply, the price would just keep going up. But eventually that party had to stop. So I think with regards to Anchor, I'm fairly certain that we will bring it back in one shape or the other because I know one of the other guys, also a good friend of mine, I think, Fafi, he's been very passionate about basically wanting to do this because he has a different take on how you could do something like this that I know that at least from what I've heard, I haven't heard all of the details yet, but I think he's working on a proposal maybe related to that.
But you're not sure yet. It's still in progress.
Very well thought through idea. I'm not sure yet, right? So for me, I think definitely if we can make Anchor work in a viable way where people earn, interest that is more than whatever inflation they're trying to avoid, while not, just creating more value than there is actual liquidity to back it, then it could work. With regards to the Mirror Protocol, the Mirror Protocol is more like, that's the whole Mirror BTC, Mirror Ethereum, and so on. For me, these types of products are very much like paper gold, if you know what that is. You probably do, but I mean, paper gold is inherently the thing that was JP Morgan got into a lot of trouble over a few years ago, because inherently it's gold that is, just paper. There's not necessarily any real gold available to back the amount of paper, right? They definitely have gold backing, but there might be an oversupply of gold IOUs compared to the actual gold backing. And that obviously constitutes a problem. So in the same way, I think Mirror Protocol and these things, they're basically paper products. And I mean, do we need paper products?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Maybe,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. But what people have to realize with these paper products is that they're typically based off a model where a smart contract will create some sort of CV20 token, and then it will lock up a protocol token, right? So take Astroport, they had this, AST, USDC or UST thing, right? So that was inherently an IOU for USDC at the end of the day. Which was then, subject to various forms of censorship because the long token, which is the governing protocol token, could theoretically pass a majority vote to censor other protocol tokens. And that would then inherently affect the paper product, right? Because if the underlying instrument gets locked up or frozen for whatever sanctioning reasons, then all of a sudden
paper
you
money's
can't
screwed.
redeem your paper money, right? And this is where I think a lot of the problems in DeFi in general was actually derived from a lot of these paper style products coming out, which is why I kind of equate DeFi to penny stocks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely think I always say we're like biotech stocks, or the most speculative, waiting for these huge catalysts to come, and hopefully we actually get to the catalyst and they get approved. So I always make that comparison.
That's what penny stocks are, right?
Essentially, right?
Watch the Wolf of Wall Street, where he sells this one guy some bundle of whatever worthless stock while he's making fun of him in front of his colleagues.
Yeah.
That's the nature of it. But yeah, so I think that's the market we are in, and I think what the institutional crypto companies, they will run towards regulation. And then I think DeFi will provide an unregulated market for, startups and stuff like that.
Yeah, we're the largest DeFi market right now, right? Cosmos in general just facilitates all of DeFi.
Yeah, I think Cosmos by now is the second largest network after Ethereum.
Because Ethereum is technically decentralized, right?
No, not at all.
It has Ethereum Foundation though, right?
No, it's centralized, but from a pure infrastructure perspective, I think it's like 56% of all nodes run in 3 companies' data centers.
Oh my God.
Not really very. I mean, obviously these companies have many data centers and they're spread all over the planet. But Ethereum currently suffers from a centralization problem. Obviously, these centralized data centers are highly protected by very skilled specialists and so on. But it still doesn't provide this natural sort of redundancy that you would have from a truly decentralized peer-to-peer network.
Yeah, we're like fortunate enough to have that. And that's why it's very important that we continue to build on Terra Luna Classic, because there's really no other decentralized entity that's actually decentralized. Most of it, for example, like we had TFL. TFL controlled everything for the most part. All validators listened to TFL. They all bowed down. And for me, like,
our network is highly centralized, or was highly centralized.
It was.
And still to a point is due to the LCD. I mean, in that sense, the second layer stuff still has to be distributed out a bit to avoid getting too much denial of service and stuff like that. But that's a process, and I've spoken about this in a few cases, but my goal with what I like to call V25, which will probably be Christmas next year, is to redesign the validator reward system in such a way that incentivizes greater distribution of nodes geographically. So inherently, we might give people setting up nodes on a continent where there are no nodes a certain, let's call it, premium on their voting power, to say that, okay, you have enough tokens to be number 131, so you don't get any rewards. But because you set up your node in a continent where there are no nodes, we're going to give you a 10% boost artificially, and that might knock you into 130th position. So all of a sudden you get a reward, thus incentivizing validators to not only start building data centers at scale, but also distributing these data centers to avoid, basically centralizing themselves out of the reward ranking, because they would, if one specific validator made an overpopulation of nodes in, say, the US, then it would probably be a lot harder to get into the system from the US than compared to, Asia or Oceania or Africa or South America or what else.
Just put it everywhere, right? As far as you can put it. You can't destroy the network if it's everywhere. So yeah, no, 100% exactly. I agree. And it has to be the top 130, very important, because those are the active validators, the ones that actually contribute to the network. Okay.
Yeah, so, but I actually think we're going to also increase that number.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, because we have another problem that a lot of people don't talk a lot about, and that is the price problem, right? Inherently, the Oracle votes every 5 blocks to update the price on chain. That creates an attack vector from a security perspective, where if people can cause enough volatility, look at, for instance, what happened with the Mango hack, then the chain will trade behind the market for 4 blocks. That's about 20 seconds. If an adversary is skilled enough and positioned for it, he can leverage that discrepancy in price to actually, make money. And then that's something that we also have to deal with. And one way to deal with that would be to increase our validator set to the point where our block times go to somewhere around maybe 15 or 18 seconds. That would enable us a large enough window to possibly vote on the price on every block. And that means that we not only don't have to store the price points on chain, we can now turn it into a transient store, which just gets discarded at every block, which makes the chain slimmer. Also means that there's no longer this window of opportunity because now we're always in sync with the off-chain prices and stuff like that. Inherently, it's actually a bit slower, but they're slowing it down by making the block times longer, makes the network more secure, and that I think is a valid trade-off because we can always, if we get to a point where this, when we ran at optimal speeds back before the DPEG, I think our block speeds were like 11 seconds or something like that, right? So it's a bump of 30-something%.
Yeah.
And if we just bump, say, the memory requirements on the mempool, let's say we increase it from 32 gigabytes to whatever, 64 gigabytes, then while it takes longer to vote on blocks, we can also take more transactions into the mempool, which will then offset the extension in time and so on. So we are basically going to have to model around this to figure out how that could work. But if we can get that working, that should further secure our network through more decentralization and through ensuring that now we have, let's call it, real-time price data on chain.
And is that coming in V25 or is that just something that's going to happen a lot sooner rather than later?
No, it's going to take me some time to build and redesign that. So that's going to be V25. It might be V26. I mean, it all depends on what happens in terms of, new upgrades coming out for Cosmos Wasm or for Cosmos SDK or for Tendermint or having to do bug fixes or, help DApp teams integrate their business ideas or whatnot. So that's a bit fluent. I like to practice agility, right? So I always have long-term goals, but I only really operate in very short-term moves.
Right.
And then once I complete one thing, I, pivot to the next. And then I try to only do like 2 or 3 things at the same time at the most when I can. And that typically allows me at the personal level to keep a certain momentum.
Yeah, you must be pretty good at chess.
I've been playing chess since I was 8 years old. My uncle gave me like a chess computer as a Christmas present. There was like what's it called, Garry Kasparov or Mikhail Kasparov, whatever this Russian guy's name is.
You just go against them?
I played chess against that computer, and then when I joined this youth club, you go to after school, I was the only kid in the group who played chess, and one of the guys taking care of the kids, he was like a professional chess player, so he started teaching me to play more chess. So I've been playing chess most of my life.
Dude, that's the thing though. People don't realize how important it is to take care of your health out of work as well and really exercise your brain. If you don't do that, you're going to be all over the place. I've had this issue a couple months ago where I was just looking at TikTok and all these social media platforms, completely disconnected myself. And from a focus standpoint, I can actually look at a screen for once, right? So definitely it's good to not force people to work because they get very stressed and then they do a worse job as a result. So, it's always grateful to have you, working your day job as well as working over here and still being mentally sane somehow.
I mean, the way I balance it out is with my Kung Fu, right? I think...
You do Kung Fu?
Yeah, I've been practicing Kung Fu for 10 years, and then I did Aikido before that and Karate.
What belt are you?
I'm not very high. I'm like
okay.
4 something.
It's a hobby, right?
It was always a hobby, so I've been training with the same people like 2 or 3 times a week for 10 years, and a lot of them are like, halfway to the black belt or whatever. But I was never very keen on graduating. I just came there as a way to get mental relief. Because like you said yourself, sometimes you have to relax your brain. And I found that for me, martial arts was a great way to focus my energy towards something entirely different and basically just clear my head. And that allowed me to actually work in the way I do now, where I do 8 hours of, pretty fucking advanced stuff at work with pretty fucking intelligent people. And then I go home and I do the same with even more intelligent people, right? And if I didn't do the exercise in between and also work my body, then I would probably cave in after, a while, because nobody can keep up that cadence if they don't stay in shape and stay focused and centered.
Yeah, it's like the Wolf of Wall Street with all those drugs, right? You got to make sure you're sane so you don't go into that rabbit hole. People are like, you do crypto content, how aren't you high on something at all times? And I'm just like, you work out. Big tech companies are really getting into that, right? It's just working out, taking care of your health, reading books, getting a hobby, making something that fulfills your life other than work. And then you do so much better at work. So for people out there, that's been something that's really been motivating for me as well. So let's go ahead and pivot here, because people are asking right now about the IBC here and V23, because V23 is coming out like in Christmas, right?
Yeah, so the whole deal with the stuff we talked about with regards to the security upgrade and the Cosmos patch and so on, all sort of plays into enabling the IBC channels that were closed. So basically what we are going to do now is we have to swap up around, so to speak. So we were talking about releasing the swap system as V23 and then doing the upgrade as V24. But it turns out that the Osmosis guys, they need us to basically dismantle the TFL-specific changes to Cosmos SDK so they can facilitate the upgrade. And that means that it's going to be a lot easier for us to actually focus on opening the IBCs along with that upgrade and then re-implementing the swap system and the treasury and all of these other pieces afterwards. So the way it looks right now, we are most likely going to change the roadmap a bit. So it's going to be upgrading the chain, enabling the IBCs, then we are doing the security fix for the LCD and so on. And that will be version 23, which I'm fairly certain we will get ready by Christmas, maybe early January.
Yeah, so main priority is
after that we will. Yeah, by far. Because, I mean, as I've said before also in other places, being behind on the Cosmos VASM version is not a good thing. Right? That makes us binary incompatible with other chains that uses another version. And while we could maybe implement something that would make it interoperable, it would be a lot better and easier for us to simply just do the upgrade. And we have a few strategies for facilitating that, so we're not really that concerned about having to do it. But right now we're working with Jacob and the Osmosis guys, and we'll see where that ends up. They, seem like nice people. I enjoy talking with them. So I have faith that we'll get that done. And that will also at the same time allow us to reopen the IBCs, because part of the work that Osmosis is doing also includes reopening the channels, right? So as soon as we get done with the code reviews and the talks and the merges of that code, inherently we will have a version of our chain that, given if we deployed the client, would open the IBC channels again. And that then allows us to then focus a bit on basically the whole capital control treasury, implementing the ABS keeper, implementing Alex's tranche idea, looking at Fafi's idea for a better anchor and so on and so forth, while knowing that we are now on an upgraded chain that has, all the necessary security patches we need to have, at least the ones that we know about, and has been patched with regards to the gas problem on the LCD and so on. And that inherently gives us like a clean slate, so to speak, in terms of focusing on building these new capital controls and so on.
And is that what they talk about when they mean Rogue One? It's literally just parity, same network upgrade as every other Cosmos SDK?
No, so Rogue One is our experimental testnet.
Okay.
So we have Rebel 1 and Rebel 2. Those are testnets for, validators.
Yeah.
And then Rogue One is a testnet for developers, which allows us to try to deploy different versions of the client to see how it behaves when we do different things, right? Because the challenge of building blockchains is that we're dealing with replicated state machines, and that means that even small changes in these state machines can have, vast consequences, and the whole emergent behavior thing. And that means that there's a lot of testing that goes into this. And we would very much like to be able to automate that testing. So I can literally write some code, do a pull request, get it approved, go to sleep, and then the next day, maybe 16 hours later, there will be a report on how that particular network behaved based on the software upgrade I deployed. And that saves me a lot of time on having to sit around and do that manually, because the problem is just starting up a new validator node on Columbus 5 takes anywhere from a few hours to my laptop. It took 12 hours.
Yeah.
Because there's a crisis invariance check that Cosmos SDK does at the beginning of spinning up the validator, which hurts everybody equally. But it basically amounts to validating all of the wallets, I think, and a lot of other things. And especially this bank crisis check thing just takes I think the validator nodes we set up, which are real servers, even spent maybe 3 or 4 hours on it, some of them. So that's, just the delay we have. And if we can automate that away, then we don't waste our time on waiting on that, right?
It's just a lot faster in general for you to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. For a lot of people, they were a bit confused on the network upgrade on V23 and the Rogue One. So it's great to get that distinction. Because especially like Edward Kim, when he was talking about the whole Rebel 1 and Rebel 2 with, maybe it can work, maybe it can't work with the USTC and USTN, at least you have something there so you can expedite the process of seeing if it can work out at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead because I don't want to keep wasting your time here. I got 2 more questions and then we're going to let you go. So this is a big one here. What is your utopian view of where you think Lunk should be heading? Because a lot of people have been reaching out to me to kind of bridge over their tokens over to the Lunk blockchain. I'm not 100% in tune with how the Cosmos SDK works in terms of launching tokens. And from what I can recall with the original Luna Classic, it was really only just NFTs and dApps, right? There was no tokens underlying in there. There was no huge bustling meme coin space. So do you see Lunk transitory over into that sphere? Do you see us transitioning into that? Or are we going to stick around and just be dApps, hard layer 1 blockchain, financial tools, tying into Cosmos?
I think Lunk will be the governance token of the the utopian view for me is going to just cause more confusion, but I guess I'll let you have it anyways. I want to build decentralized cloud computing on top of Terra Classic. I want to build Swift networks for IoT devices because I think our future is microtransactions. It's the only world wherein we can maintain a burn tax that won't be prohibitive of transactions, because sending a few $1 million across a network that taxes 1% is a lot more expensive than doing it on Bitcoin. But if you're only sending a few dollars here and there, then it's just the cost of doing business at the end of the day. So I think that is the utopian future. And then you will have USDC acting as, the money, the reserve currency, whatever. And people would use that to pay for their services, right? One of the big problems we have in SaaS, which is software as a service, is that people can either buy, a monthly license, or they can buy, some sort of estimated spendage. But with decentralized cloud computing, we could very narrowly bill people using cryptocurrency for each CPU cycle. So you pay for what you use rather than pay for some, either tier or some just fixed priced thing. So that for me is the utopian future. And then I'm going to slap code streaming on top of that, which is basically something I spent 10 years dreaming about. And one of the reasons why I'm also here. But again, that's the utopian view. And I'm going to have to write a shit ton of white papers after saying this in your show now, because now everybody wants to know what that is. Yeah.
Exactly. We got the insider on that, right? And I think it's great to be forward looking, but if we're looking at timelines, especially on your proposal, let's say everybody wants this USDC repack proposal and they want Alex's too. How soon do you think you can implement this onto the chain?
Well, maybe if you want me to, I can bring in Ed to help answer that question. He just came off work.
That'd be great.
Yeah, let me just pull him into the talk, then you can ask him that question. See.
We got a
Cool.
surprise guest over here with Ed.
I actually think maybe.
So he
you
works
have to
too,
invite
huh?
him. What?
You all work day jobs.
Yeah, we all
That's
work.
crazy. And I do this full time, and I feel like I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I can't even imagine how you guys feel.
I mean, for us it's sort of a hobby by now, I guess. But
You're
hey,
used
Ed,
to it,
man,
right?
joining
Yeah.
us.
How you doing, Ed?
Doing well. How are you?
No, pretty good. We're actually live streaming this right now to 400 people on the
Yeah, so
Classic
sorry
Crypto
for
YouTube
putting you
channel.
on the spot.
Yeah, a little bit on the spot.
No problem. No problem.
So go ahead, Zaradar. Give him the tea.
No, you can ask him the question, man.
Okay. So pretty much like we were looking into the timelines with the USTC and USTN proposals, and people were kind of asking, even if everybody wanted this to pass, how long would it take to actually implement on our blockchain?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, of course. Hey, Zaradar said it. Put Edward Kim in here.
Yeah, put him on the spot.
Well, I think this talk it's good to have these sort of debates and all this right now. It's going to take a long time to work all the details out, but we are kind of premature in the whole idea of putting this on the blockchain, just because we have a few other items that are more, I guess, more fleshed out, more pressing right now, like the upgrade to. I guess we're calling it V23, but that name has to change eventually.
Yeah.
But essentially,
Yeah.
I mean, we have we have a bunch of things that we need to do in upgrading Cosmwasm, in upgrading some of the underlying Cosmos Tendermint libraries. I mean, I think you heard that there was that vulnerability that came through earlier this week, which sort of forced our hand, and it was kind of a good thing in some way. I mean, it was not a good thing, but it definitely got sort of a pipeline of getting the validators to update from a specific repo. We were able to do it very quickly. Within like 5 hours, we had over 33% of the voting power. I mean, it's night and day from like August 26th. That sort of that effort that we had to put in to get anything on the blockchain to we can do it in 5 hours now, right? So I mean, it was a good sort of test for us to see how well we could operate under pressure.
Yeah, for sure. I also think personally it was a good thing. If I should pitch in here a bit, I think that in general, Ed has already shown us that he can do both USTN and commodity tokens, right? Because there's this whitelist thing where we can actually just add tokens, and this is what we're working on, basically making dynamic. So that piece of it in itself is not too complex to do. The ABS keeper that I've been working on is more or less, it's not finished, but it needs some tweaking, but it's ready for testing. Then we need to build that into the remittance corridor concept, which is essentially individual break factors for the individual denoms. And then we have to re-implement the swap system, right? And because that can't happen until after we're done with the upgrade, as Ed pointed out, then most likely the timeline is that by sometime next summer, we will be running this in testnet with USTN and commodity tokens and whatever we feel is right. And then we will be having the partition pool concept available so people can start playing around with that. And then we will start focusing on testing the tranche system as well. So I think, early beta somewhere around summer next year is probably not totally unfeasible.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I wanted to drive that point because for a lot of people, they think these proposals coming out now just means that this is the end all be all. For the most part, this is just all discussions. People are determining where the public is gauging whether or not these proposals can work out in the first place. People are changing it around. This is probably not going to be the final version. I know I saw Alex say that was the final version of his proposal, but people are always moving things all over the place, and we'll see what ends up happening by the time summer comes. In cryptocurrency, that's at least a decade in human years. So we'll see.
No,
We'll see how that goes.
But as Ed pointed out, right, I think inherently it's a good thing that we have many different ideas.
Of course.
That is one of the strengths of our network. And I think sometimes it's, we shouldn't really try to put these proposals up against each other. It's not really a contest where it's like Highlander, there's only one left. This is more about exchanging ideas because that's what science is about at the end of the day. And then with all the intelligent heads we have, around, we will derive to some sort of shared view that we feel can work, which will then become hopefully the quant white paper, and that can then create this sort of consensus on how to operate on the sort of economic side of things, because Ed and Raider and Marventus and myself and all the other devs, we have a fairly good grasp on the technical side of it. Our main challenges are, lack of infrastructure or lack of time or lack of funding or whatnot. But these are problems that we can solve, whereas we can't just decide what the solution should be for the economic side. We need to first gain consensus and have, the community rally around that, so we can focus our energy not on arguing about whose proposal is the best, but on how we can derive the most value from the intellectual capacity or capital that we have now built up and attracted into the network, right? Because it's a good thing that guys like Alex and Fafi and myself and Ed, we sit around and write these white papers, because that allows all the other intellectuals in the network to stimulate their thought streams and come up with other ideas.
I think that's a great perspective in regards to letting people know that it's not really about going after each other. It's more so trying to get the best solution out of every proposal that gets put out there. We're just a bunch of minds that are intelligent. This is an incredibly difficult blockchain to understand. And, I don't think half of this chat, if any of this chat, even understands what something like an ABS keeper is, or volatility guards, or tranche systems. So it's nice to have people like you, Alex, Fafi, and Edward Kim here to be able to explain these things in an AMA that's an hour long, bite-sized. And so if we continue to do these every now and then, I'm sure people can more and more become educated, because, initially we all came to, like you said, austerity back when the 1.2% burn happened. Now we know that there needs to be some sort of change with it. Most developers are for it, but they also understand that we need to burn the supply. There's no denying that needs to happen. So, solutions are being given. Minting is not being done. Of course, minting is an inherent part of Terra Luna Classic, but artificial minting, the minting of just random a bunch of tokens off quantitative easing, like the US dollar is doing and destroying most other major currencies, that's not a sustainable model. It's great that we're in a decentralized world where we don't care. We're doing our own thing.
Yeah. I mean, we get a financial index update every morning at work. Today we got an update on an index that is tracking countries with more than 20% inflation, and that list has more than doubled in the last year or two.
It's what, like 9 countries?
20 plus.
Wow. Yeah, that's scary. Yeah, no, I thought that was only
I mean,
like 9
so
countries.
we're talking about countries that are feeling 20% reduction in purchasing power every month. Right? That's fucking insane.
It's also fucking insane that we pump despite that happening, right? There's no liquidity in crypto right now.
No, but I think there's a lot of people trying to front run the next bull market, right? That's inherently the greed factor, and some people will get, margin calls on that, and some people will, make money off it depending on how lucky they are.
Yeah, the degen hours, right, in cryptocurrency. Always a thing. You can get crazy returns. You can get crazy losses. I'm always not an advocate for margin trading, especially during these times where there's so much, let's just say, we don't know what's going to happen next, uncertainty. So, it's great to have a team that acknowledges this, understands that we need to have these things done in certain timelines that aren't pushed too quickly, because, we don't know where the world's going to be in a year from now. So, do things with time, do things with patience, go to an overwhelming consensus, push forward the blockchain. And, that's what we learned in this AMA, that things are being done, that progress is being made, and that things are being done in a way that is just not rushed. Because it may seem rushed with these proposals being put out, but they're not on the blockchain. This is just an idea, a white paper, of an idea. There's going to be many different iterations of it, probably coming from more than just these 3 developers. At some point, someone else is going to come here and be like, I think I have a better solution. And then Zaradar, Alex.
I personally hope that one day we will arrive to a point where we have a prosperous network and we have many different developer teams building clients for the proof of stake layer of that network, or for the governance layer, right? This is what I call client diversity, because when you have a proof of stake system, it's actually a security risk if you only have one client implementation, right? So that's my, another part of my utopian future is having 4 or 5 different clients, one built in Go, one built in Rust, one built, whatever, and have different groups managing these, because that will also make the network more secure.
So more like languages of code is what you're trying to say.
Think of it like us deriving a standard of how a Terra Classic client should behave. Because at the end of the day, what decides the signature of the block is really just the queries and the the events that you emit from your keepers, which amount to the transactions that go into the block. But there's a lot of computation that takes place between you querying something or sending an event that can be implemented in different ways without altering how the signature is generated, right? And that means we can decide on a public standard for how to implement a client for the network, which would then let other people come in and build clients in different ways or in different languages, as long as they adhere to the high-level standard of how a Terra Classic client should behave.
And is that something that's been implemented in other blockchains, or just an idea that you've come across?
No, I mean, Ethereum has, I've derived this from my study of Ethereum over the years, right? They have, I think, 4 or 5 different clients, but their problem is that one of the clients has the majority of the network. What
Solidity,
you really
right?
want is you want to have, I think it's Geth, but I can't remember. But it's basically one of them. Solidity is the language they use for smart contracts. So that's, I think maybe it's also a client now, I don't remember. But the point is that they have like 5 different clients, and you want to try to balance how many validators run these clients, just like you want to balance the delegation, so not everybody delegates with the same validator. I mean, just like Ed has said many times before, and I also follow Ed's advice on this, I try to redelegate to smaller validators to keep them in the game and make sure that they also survive. And that's sort of in the same way we should have, utopianly, or from a utopian perspective, a world where we had 5 clients that each had 20% of the validator set running their specific client implementation. That would give us a very strong governance layer that would be almost impossible to penetrate from, a cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're going to be launching Classic's Cryptosphere in October 27th. Originally, it was going to be me and Crypto King, but I figured we could further decentralize the network if we just make our own validator nodes. So, I encourage everybody. They're already, saying that next year they might add more validators. In fact, they probably are going to be adding more validator slots on the active set. If you're trying to make a validator at some point, you can go ahead, build up to that, launch your validator, help further decentralize the network, especially if you're in continents like Africa or Australia or, literally anywhere. You could be in Indonesia, right? In the most random places on the planet. That's great, right? We like decentralization. So you can go ahead, do that, support the network. And, something I'm trying to do, I think we should coordinate after this talk, is finding some kind of donation wallet. I know Terrebels has that. I need to confirm if that's like for you guys as well. But to be able to donate as like a validator, I think would be great for helping further give ecosystem infrastructure, right? You pay off your validator, you do some burns, you give to the developers actually making everything happen, and I think everybody's going to be happy, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. I know that Ed and I would love some more servers. That's for sure. We love servers.
Yeah, they're expensive. But it's okay. It's nothing we can't fix, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for your time, Zaradar. This is essentially going to be the AMA. For people, if you want to do the validator after, we can have videos on that. There's plenty of resources out there. But, Edward Kim, special guest as well. Thank you for hopping on by. Truly a pleasure to have you guys. You should definitely do this, as we get closer to V23, the IBC, any important updates. We're all here for it. But as always, let me go ahead and end the stream here. My name is Classic Crypto. If you were to go ahead, like and subscribe if you want to see more of this juicy content on Luna Classic, because we're here all month, all year, talking about that juicy lunch.
So, there you have it. The AMA has concluded. We hope you enjoyed and learned something from it. As always, thank you for being a part of the Luna Classic community, and keep it classic, Luna Classic.